Part 8. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 73. In the blink of an eye, I had already spent 3 days at the exhibition. 3 days is only equivalent to 12 hours in the outside world. But Su Tong did not stay any longer. After redeeming 2 more prop cards at the exhibition, he chose to leave early. Yes, this is a paradise for drunk and gold lovers. Everything is available. The facade of each store looks small, but when you go inside, you will find that the space is endless. But if he stayed there for a long time, it would inevitably give him the illusion of a walking corpse. After all, when you open your eyes and look down from the 300 square meter luxury suite, there are no pancakes and fruits on the street, no street vendors, and no beef patties that he wants to eat. There are only white masks and gray shadows on the cold streets, and every corner is filled with the smell of trade. You will find the world lifeless. So this isn't heaven, it's more like hell, at least for him. After silently reciting the words "leave in my heart," my eyes suddenly went dark with a strong pulling feeling, followed by the blazing summer sun. Look at the sun above your head, ha, it's just time for dinner. If I go back at this time, I can cook for the old man. Thinking of this, Su Tong bought some braised meat and vegetables. Speaking of which, there are all kinds of talents in the ward, including artists, teachers, and even psychiatrists, etc. But for some reason, there is no cook. Fortunately, Mr. Song was never picky about food as long as he had meat, wine, and cigarettes. Speaking of the hospital, he couldn't help but think of Yang Zixuan's words 3 days ago. If he wanted to become a player, he had to rely on luck, and he received the invitation card inexplicably. Yang Zixuan didn't pay much attention at the time, just like that, he was eating hot pot and singing little songs, and in the end, he got an invitation card in his hand. The second type is also luck, but the probability is very small, and it mostly happens to novice players. That is, as Su Tong saw that night, if a newcomer is late or fails to show up after receiving the invitation card, then the script studio will erase his quota and choose someone from the nearest range to fill it. What if you still don't go? Then it's not up to him. Anyway, there is a way to bring you in. It's quite mysterious. Yang Zixuan doesn't know the details. The third option is to redeem invitation cards. Use script badges to redeem, and you only need 5 bronze badges to redeem an invitation card. But the cost is not small. Although Yang Zixuan did not specify the details, he also vaguely reminded Su Tong that these script bronze medals seemed to play a key role. Looking at the prop book, I got 3 badges for my first script, and only 1 for my second script. Now I have 4 badges in my hand, and I only need to collect 1 more to redeem the invitation card. Hey, my dear brother, I'm so heartbroken for you. Thinking of this, he sighed and walked through the alley back to the East Street entrance. However, as soon as he walked out of the alley, he suddenly hid against the wall, his eyes suddenly darkened, and he hid by the wall and glanced sideways towards the street entrance. I saw a police car parked in front of my house. If I looked carefully, it was not difficult to find that there was someone sitting in the police car. Is this waiting for me? Su Tong's eyes flickered, and the first thought that came to his mind was the dance he performed at the gate of the antique city yesterday when he fell ill again. In addition, he couldn't imagine how the police found him so quickly because he never left home. Too careless. He didn't take it seriously at first. After all, he just danced a few times, without packaging or music, and posted them on the internet. He was not even qualified to become an emoticon. Under the waves of short videos of counting money every day, he was afraid that he would not even be able to jump on the waves. I didn't expect that it would attract the attention of the police so quickly. This made him secretly blame himself, but he had nothing to complain about his condition. 8 of the 10 mentally ill people in the mental hospital knew what was going on with him. But you know, the vast majority of people choose to accept it calmly, just like everyone knows how to pick their noses, but who would dislike their own noses? After all, they are part of their own bodies, and who would think it is redundant? However, Su Tong probably didn't expect that the reason for his exposure had little to do with his dancing. The direct reason was Laotoule on the third floor of the antique city. He thought for a moment and took out something from the prop book. Jack's mask, 5/6. It costs 2 script points and can change your appearance after wearing it. The duration is 12 hours. If it times out, 2 script points will be deducted again and the delay will be 12 hours. Cooling time, 0. Note, what's fake can't be real, and what's real can't be fake. What changes is the face, but what cannot be changed is the person, so, don't expect to sneak into the women's bathhouse wearing a toy. As mentioned before, he exchanged 2 props before leaving the exhibition. One of them is this one. It's not expensive and only costs 40 script points. In fact, this thing is quite practical, but the price is not high precisely because it has a limit on the number of times it can be used and is a consumable. The main purpose of redeeming it is to go to the mental hospital and pick up my little friend and good brother after the next script is over. I just didn't expect to use it so quickly. The other prop card is not expensive at 120 script points. Mixed martial arts. Passive skill 1, fighting expert. Holders can master mixed martial arts skills. Passive skill 2, flexible pace. When the holder is fighting, the body will gain an extra 5% of the movement speed, which will end after the battle. This prop card is more than 1.5 points worse than the powerful Vajra fist I saw before. One is a powerful skill that can break stones with the fist, and the other is an ordinary fist and kick skill. The former increases the strength by 30%, while the latter is only pitiful. A negligible 5% point movement speed. But the price is also more than 1.5 stars away. If given a choice, he would definitely choose the former, but his wallet disagreed, so he could only choose this prop card for a temporary transition to make up for his lack of attack methods. After putting on the mask, Su Tong's face gradually changed. His originally thin face suddenly became slightly fatter. His eyes were squinted, as big as sesame beans, and he looked like a simple, cute, and honest person. With such an appearance, he is the most popular target among street hustlers, road security guards, and insurance salesmen when walking on the road. After all, people are stupid and easy to talk to. But for those police officers, most of them would choose to ignore it. What mistake could such a fool make? After changing his appearance, Su Tong turned around and walked out of the alley and walked towards the door of his house. Before I could enter the house, I saw 3 police officers in the car walking out. Wait a minute, what's your name? Is this your home? I. Su Tong, who had just reached the door of the house, immediately trotted to the police car. After hearing the questioning, he immediately explained, "This is my uncle's house. I am his distant relative. My name is Song Zifeng. Your uncle, take out your ID card." The police looked at him coldly and stretched out their hands to ask for his ID card. It seemed that there was no escape. However, Su Tong suddenly slapped his thigh and said with a sad face, "Lost it." "Lost? When did you lose it?" The 3 of them glanced at each other out of the corner of their eyes, and the other 2 policemen had already tacitly blocked the direction to his left and right. "I just lost it yesterday." "You don't know that an imposter came yesterday and pretended to be me. My uncle is also old and confused. I opened the door for him and gave him food. It turned out to be a thief. Before leaving, a set of my clothes were taken away, and my ID card was also taken away. Is it this suit?" A policeman quickly sensed the key and immediately took out his mobile phone and motioned for him to take a look. Su Tong took a look and saw that it was indeed a photo of himself dancing in the antique market yesterday, So he nodded with certainty, yes, that's him, you have to catch him back, this guy is so hateful, even my shoes take them all away, look at me still wearing flip-flops. He started chattering. This made the three policemen a little impatient. At this moment, they saw Sun Liansheng walking out of the door. Seeing this, they couldn't help but frown. What's going on? Captain, it's like this. A police officer came forward and whispered what had happened. Sun Liansheng raised his eyebrows and said, "You're late. This guy stole his clothes and ID card. He might be leaving the province, so hurry up and leave." After saying that, he asked several team members to get in the car, but Su Tong was ignored. After watching the car go away, he tiptoed back to the door and quickly closed the door, thinking, "Hey, just go find it slowly." As he spoke, he opened the door and turned around to see Mr. Song standing behind him, staring at him. The two stared at each other for a few seconds, and then they heard Mr. Song suddenly curse, "You stinky boy, where have you been? Hurry up and cook, I'm starving." Su Tong was startled, nodded, and walked towards the kitchen, but after taking 2 steps, his steps suddenly stopped. No, he was still wearing a mask. How did the old man recognize him? With suspicious eyes, he quietly looked behind him and vaguely saw a few strands of blue cold light flashing in the old man's cloudy eyes. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 74. Su Tong was stunned for a moment, wondering if he had seen it wrong, but when he looked again, he could only see the old man's resentful eyes, so he had to lower his head angrily and ran into the kitchen to cook for the old man. 4 dishes and 1 soup, although the taste is average, the presentation looks pretty good. Together with a bottle of Urquatu, Mr. Song's favorite drink, Mr. Song's resentful eyes finally softened a lot. But the strange thing is that no one mentioned today's matter at the dinner table. The old man didn't mention it, so of course he wouldn't feel uncomfortable. After dinner, he cleared the table and lay down on his bed. He summoned the prop book in front of him, and couldn't help but look at the Star I Tribulation prop card. Although this prop card has a drawback, compared to its powerful attributes, it is completely outweighed by its flaws. In addition to actively enhancing a skill, the 2 accompanying passives are extremely impressive in themselves. One is to increase the control ability by 20%, coupled with the 30% increase in control ability brought by Puppet Controller. The improvement in control ability has been a huge improvement. The other is Dark Vision, which is both practical and free of charge. But the dilemma now is which skill should be more cost-effective for him to bind Star I Tribulation to. After careful consideration, he set his sights on the 3 skills of Demon Power, Paper Control Technique, and Evil Sound. The reason why these 2 skills were chosen is that there is a limit to the powerful increase, and skills that activate more than 10 script points cannot be enhanced. For a big move like the Devil's Coming, the activation standard requires 40% of the script points. No matter how poor I am, 40% will never be less than 20 script points, so this is far beyond the requirement for a strong increase. If you forcefully choose to upgrade the Demon King's Advent, it's not impossible. But the most likely possibility is that this trump card that could have been activated at any time will suddenly require that the script score drop below double digits before it can be activated. If it really comes to that point, is there any point in increasing my own ability? Wouldn't it be more comfortable to lie down and die? Therefore, the skills to be upgraded must meet the 3 prerequisites: short cooling time, low consumption, and maximizing one's combat effectiveness. The 3 skills, in terms of damage, must be demonic power. After all, the enhanced strength also comes with demonic flame damage. Even Huo Ying's bloodthirsty bees can be burned to dregs. But this skill only lasts for 30 seconds and has a 2-hour cooldown. It is really the patent of a quick shooter. Even after strong amplification, in the final analysis, it is still a quick shooter. In comparison, The demonic voice is more practical. It has a short cooldown, low consumption, and also comes with mental damage. At first glance, it looks like a young and energetic young man. If this were upgraded, wouldn't it be like replacing a shotgun with a cannon? However, after hesitating again and again, he still turned his attention to paper control technique. He had high hopes for this ability early on, but perhaps because the paper maker's book had not thoroughly evaluated it, this ability had many shortcomings. After all, the paper man has a weight limit of 30 grams, so it is bound to be difficult to achieve the desired effect. This is it. Lying on the bed, thinking about it, Su Tong finally gritted his teeth and decided to improve the paper control technique. The reason is simple. Who hasn't dreamed of it these days? He doesn't know how to control a sword, but he can control paper skills. As a human being, you always have to have dreams. Furthermore, the amplification effects brought about by both Star Eye Tribulation and Puppet Controller are visible to the naked eye. From this aspect alone, the paper control technique you chose is the most reasonable. Holding on to his spring and autumn dream, Su Tong tried to activate the powerful amplification of Star Eye Tribulation. You will use a powerful amplification technique to upgrade a skill. Do you want to confirm it? After confirmation, if you need to unbind it, you need to pay an additional 20 script points. Sure. Su Tong nodded decisively, thinking that if it was really muddy and couldn't help him get on stage, he didn't know how to tie him up, and he would be at a loss. As he confirmed his choice, the Star Eye Tribulation in the prop book suddenly appeared in his hand, and the gem on the ring burst out with a bright light, reflecting on the prop book. He discovered that the prop card paper maker's book was covered with a faint halo, and the halo circulated, creating a hazy sense of mystery. If you take a closer look, it feels like a low-end version of the dynamic skin, but even the low-end version is much better looking than other prop cards. He quickly went up to take a look. When he saw the new skill changes, his eyes narrowed. He took out the cigar that he had not finished smoking last time from the prop book and slowly baked it and carbonized it. The cigarette butt took a big puff. His smoke clouds filled the air with each breath, and the slender eyebrows were slightly raised. It's really a bloody profit. Paper control technique, enhanced version. Can control paper artifacts. If it is a paper man, you can get an additional strength bonus. The paper man can be equipped with items, but the total weight must not exceed 700 grams, including the paper man. Controlling effects, practice on your own. Each time lasts for 30 minutes. If additional minutes are needed, an additional 4 script points will be consumed every 20 minutes. Note, as the number of paper products controlled increases, the consumption will also increase exponentially. Cooling time, 5 minutes. Looking at the brand new paper control technique in front of him, Su Tong's eyes gleamed. This was definitely a qualitative change from a shotgun to a cannon, and a bicycle to a motorcycle. You must know that originally, you could only control small paper figures that did not weigh more than 30 grams, and you could not equip the paper figures with any weapons. It's better now, it's increased by more than 1 kilogram. It weighs more than 1 kilogram, which means that you can make a big guy, a real little helper. What's more, after the paper control technique is upgraded, he can also control other paper items. This means that he turned his eyes and looked at the Walkman on the bedside. The world of mortals is so ridiculous, infatuation is the most boring, and even arrogant. Dressed in white, he stood like snow on the top of the mountain. Facing the enemies behind him, he smiled contemptuously, summoned a big golden sword with a snap of his fingers, and flew away. This life is over, but my heart is no longer disturbed. I just want to be free for half a lifetime. When he woke up from his dream, he found that it was almost dark outside. Mr. Song was so angry that he walked in the door with a cane and smashed all his dreams to pieces with a stick. Seeing Mr. Song, whose beard was standing up with anger, Su Tong could only run into the kitchen dejectedly to cook for the old man. You can't help but praise me. Yesterday I thought you were a bit interesting. Today you just sleep in. After dinner, I will go to the woodshed and finish the unfinished paper figures for me. At dinner, Mr. Song scolded him again, and Su Tong could only accept it obediently. However, while being scolded, he did not forget to ask Mr. Song for advice on how to make the paper man stronger with limited weight. Although Mr. Song has a weird temper, he never hides from Su Tong. As soon as he talked about the problem, he drew a sketch for him. After getting the sketch, Su Tong immediately felt like he had found a treasure, and rushed into the woodshed to start working. At night, the bells were ringing loudly. Mr. Song poked his head out of the house and looked in the direction of the woodshed. He saw Su Tong sitting on the horse under the light, comparing the sketches while weaving the skeleton, and his heart suddenly changed. A lot of relief. He turned around and walked into the house, sat on the master's chair, and lit a cigarette. The pendulum of the clock kept making a clicking sound. Along with the floating smoke clouds, several paper figures sat on chairs in the dim room. Their gray-white faces looked a little yellow under the light bulbs, and their black and white eyeballs were always staring ahead. After a while, Mr. Song threw the cigarette butt into the ashtray. Give me some more time. After being silent for a long time, Mr. Song glanced in the direction of the firewood shed outside the door. Master will leave these things. You always have to wait for me to leave some skills. When I go down, you can tell Master that we still have the skill, just stick to one route. I saw him talking, taking out a small box from under the table, and opening the box revealed an incense burner. That's all. Just make do with it and help me block it. As he was talking, he picked up a match, struck it lightly and said Ziu. Looking at the flames lit by the match, he threw it into the incense burner. Suddenly, an indescribable strange fragrance came from the incense burner. Flowed out. Mr. Song pulled the lamp casually, stood up, and lay back on the bed with his hands behind his back. Da-da-da-da. The dark room was eerily quiet for a while, but at some point, several paper figures sitting on the Grand Master's chair turned their heads one after another. Their black and white eyes seemed to be laughing or crying. Continue to code Chapter 3. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 75. It's finally done. Su Tong raised his head and twisted his stiff neck. He turned his head and saw that the sky outside was already bright and the clouds in the distance were stained with a layer of red under the sunlight. Look at the time, it's only 5 o'clock in the morning. If you listen carefully, you can still hear the sound of those environmentally friendly ladies sweeping the floor on the street. I have been busy all night, but my efforts have paid off. In front of me, I saw a fat man standing obediently in front of me, with a round little head and a simple and honest smile on his face. He wore a dome hat on his head and bowed his hands, looking like he was congratulating himself for getting rich. It's really loved by everyone. Pick it up and feel it, the weight is just right. Fortunately, Mr. Song gave him a sketch of the skeleton, otherwise it would not have been easy to do it by himself. Don't underestimate this paper figurine. It's not the junk from a birthday material store where a hole will appear when you poke it with your finger. This is made of pieces of white paper no bigger than a wonton wrapper, square and as thin as cicada wings, layered with paper and paste. With the blessing of the papermaker's book, it took me a whole night to complete it. And I saw Su Tong casually pick up a stick that was about the same thickness as a rolling pin, stood up, and suddenly aimed at the little fat man's head and hit it. With a bang sound, the stick broke into 2 halves. Looking at the little fat man again, there wasn't even a mark on his head. You get what you pay for. Seeing this, Su Tong let out a long sigh and looked at the script score of only 320 points left in his prop book, feeling a twinge of pain. It turns out that in order to achieve the best effect, every piece of paper was pasted after he had blessed it with spiritual enchantment. Just this gadget cost him almost 200 scripts to break. If it could be smashed with a stick, he would send it directly to the crematorium. After weighing the weight, I felt that there was still some left, so I could equip it with a handy weapon. It just so happens that I still have some silver foil paper that has been successfully enchanted with spirits, so I can make a weapon with no problem. What? Why not use gold foil? Because he has never succeeded in possessing spirits on gold foil so far. Thinking about the script points wasted on it, it's all tears. I'll just call you Fatty from now on. It's easy to make a living with a bad name. He patted the fat man's head, but he always felt that the fat man was missing something, but he couldn't pinpoint the details. I always feel that compared with the paper figures in the old man's house, there are always some differences. Maybe my skills are not enough. Thinking of this, he immediately threw the little fat man into the prop book. Unexpectedly, the prop book actually gave evaluation attributes. Paper Fatty, Producer, Su Tong. The product of enchantment and paper craftsmanship. Item Passive, Spirit Enchant Paper Armor. Reinforced armor has high physical resistance and a certain tolerance to water and fire damage. This item is a self-produced prop. It is recommended to produce and sell it yourself. It is not recommended to sell it after all, it will be a loss if it cannot be sold at a high price. Not bad. He didn't expect that the paper man he made had this attribute, which made him feel even more comfortable. Hey, the paper figures in the old man's room are better than Fatty. I wonder if they have any special attributes. A bold idea sprouted in his mind. But on second thought, let's forget it. Just like the way the old man carefully dusted them with a chicken feather blanket every day, he felt closer than family members. If he really messed up, he might have to be expelled from the school. Buzz. When he was thinking about the paper figures in the old man's room, Mr. Song had already opened the door and walked out with a urinal. When he saw him, he was stunned for a moment, then sighed and said, "Go wash your face and eat. Order something, come back and have a good sleep, don't stay up late all the time in the future, it will hurt your body and spirit." "Okay, old man, let's go have some soup together." He knew that Mr. Song must have soup every day. It happened that he had been busy all night, and when he came back with a full stomach, he could sleep happily, not to mention how comfortable he was. "Wait." Mr. Song nodded and began to brush his teeth and comb himself. He wrung out the hot towel and put it on his face. After a while, he started scrubbing his face. This would allow the pores to open naturally and not be too irritated. The old man combed his already thin hair over and over again. In fact, he was not only combing his hair, but also massaging his scalp. It is said that this can effectively prevent and treat Alzheimer's disease. Although he is old, although the clothes on Mr. Song's body look a bit old, every piece is neat and has a soapy smell. It's not as good as modern soaps with various scents, but this scent gives people a kind and natural feeling. So don't think those elderly people are sloppy. If someone is particular about some things, they can throw you off the map. In fact, the soup restaurants in El City often open at 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even earlier, at 4:30. As soon as you enter the door, you can see some old people sitting down, buying a pancake and a bowl of soup for 5 yuan. It's not that you can't afford the expensive food, it's that it's not necessary. I came here just to have a mouthful of soup. Just this little thing, not even soda, no chili pepper, no salt, and you can drink it until 7 in the morning. Old man Zhang, why do you come so early every time? Mr. Song walked in the door with a cane. He first glanced at the table on the left and frowned when he saw that there was no one there. Turning his head, he glanced at the table on the right and saw Old Man Zhang with white hair sitting there, and said hello with a smile. Old Man Zhang just smiled and nodded without saying anything, and continued to drink the soup from his bowl. Usually Mr. Song would serve the soup himself, but today he didn't need to do anything. Su Tong had already brought the soup to him. The milky white soup is topped with a layer of golden fat and a thick layer of coriander and chopped green onion. The presentation alone is enough to make you want to eat. I soaked in the freshly baked shortbread and took a sip of the soup. I felt the soup was delicious and sweet, and I let out a long breath, feeling that the fatigue of the night was also exhaled with this breath. Su Tong ate faster. Seeing that his pancake was finished, Mr. Song casually gave him his pancake and said, "Let's eat together." "Master, you only want soup." He glanced at Mr. Song's bowl and found that in the blink of an eye, most of the soup was already gone. He quickly stood up to refill his soup. However, Mr. Song stretched out his hand and covered the mouth of the soup. "No, after eating, let's take advantage of the cool weather to go to a friend's house with me." "Oh." Mr. Song seemed to be in a lack of interest today, so Su Tong didn't ask any questions. He gnawed on the pancake and slurped down the full bowl of mutton soup. The two of them finished their breakfast. It was only 6:05, but there were not many cars on the main road. After all, this is L City, only a second-tier city. It is far from the first-tier cities that have the feeling of being stuck in traffic jams at dawn. The two walked along the pedestrian street into a small alley, turning left and right. After walking for about 5 or 6 minutes, they saw Mr. Song looking up at the dark door in front of him. "This is the house." He stepped forward and knocked on the door. When no one responded, he took a step back and said, "Kick it away." Even Su Tong was stunned by the old man's words, but when he saw the old man nodded towards him, he didn't think much and stepped up. He heard a bang and the door was kicked open by him. As soon as the door opened, a musty smell hit him, and he saw an old man lying on a rocking chair in the small courtyard, holding a fan in his hand. The lights in the room were on and the TV was on, but the man was lying on it and was not breathing. Su Tong stepped forward and touched it gently. The body was already hard. It was obvious that it had died last night. "Why?" Mr. Song closed the courtyard door and walked to the body. He looked at the old man who seemed to be sleeping. Then he saw that there was a bottle of newly released liquor next to his table. It was called Jiangmai Bai. He couldn't help but shake his head. "Yesterday I told you not to drink this stuff, why didn't you listen to it?" After saying that, he took out a small yellowed bamboo tube from his pocket, about 2 feet long and a little finger wide. When he opened it, he saw that it actually contained some yellow incense. You should also be prepared in the future. Although our business is in the business of living people, we are also in the business of friendship with the dead. From now on, keep something with you to always be prepared. Mr. Song took out 3 sticks of yellow incense and kept talking. "Isn't this what my master said?" Su Tong remembered his master's words in front of the grave. Just as he was thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel excited when he heard Mr. Song's next words. "I'm going to teach you something real today." While Mr. Song was talking, he took out a paper figure from his pocket. The appearance and style of the paper figure were almost exactly the same as the one the master took out in front of the grave. He held the paper figure on his fingertips and muttered a few chattering curses in his mouth. Su Tong stood aside and listened clearly. Isn't this the same formula for finding graves and asking for directions that his master taught him? But if you listen carefully, there is something slightly different. Unfortunately, the old man read it too fast and he didn't understand it. He saw the old man throw the paper man to the ground, and the paper man knelt down and bowed. This is called a paper arch table. As he spoke, Mr. Song lit the 3 sticks of yellow incense he had just taken out and inserted them into the arms of the paper man. Then he took out a stack of paper money with square holes and asked Su Tong to sprinkle it around first. Strangely enough, when the paper money was sprinkled, Su Tong immediately noticed that the faint musty smell around him dispersed. The spirit resides in the body, just like a burning candle of fire, there is no candle, and fire cannot travel alone in the void. Therefore, death is like a lamp extinguished, and all thoughts are turned to ashes. Mr. Song turned around and saw that Su Tong was confused and didn't understand what he meant, so he said, "When you go home, go to the second row of the bedside table on the left side of my room. There is a copy of New Theory, Xin Shen chapter written by Huan Tan of the Eastern Han Dynasty. It's okay, take a good look at it, I've made annotations in it, if you don't understand, just ask." Looking at Mr. Song's serious expression, Su Tong nodded repeatedly and said to himself, "As expected of my master, I can't avoid studying." While the two were talking, the 3 sticks of yellow incense had burned to the end. The yellow incense stained the paper figures on the ground, and lit them up with a bang. It was at this time that Su Tong discovered that the old man lying on the rocking chair had a stream of black blood starting to flow from his nose. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 77. Quick, use this to collect the black blood. Mr. Song gave him a small glass bottle with a dropper and asked him to collect the black blood. After he collected the black blood and put it under the sunlight, the strange thing was that the obviously black liquid began to become transparent a little under the sunlight. When he took it back again, he found that it was as black as ink again. This thing is called resentment. When people are alive, they fight for breath, and when they die, they have to spit it out. But after most people die, there are still many things they can't let go of, and they hold back their breath and refuse to let it out. This is resentment. Su Tong nodded with a look of confusion on his face, but he didn't expect such a statement. Looking again, I saw the old man lying on the rocking chair, his pale face actually started to look rosy. "Okay, it's none of your business. You go back first and I'll notify the family." Mr. Song waved his hand to indicate that he should go back first. Su Tong then thought about it. The police would come to do the autopsy later, and staying here by himself would only increase the uncertainty. So he put his things away, left the alley, and went home to wait. When he got home, he followed what Song Long said, walked into the house, opened the old man's bedside table, and saw that there were boxes full of books neatly placed inside. These books, without exception, are all old editions bound by thread. Most of these book covers are yellowed, and some are even severely discolored, but overall there are no defects or corners at all. It can be seen that these books are all carefully protected by Mr. Song. He picked up one at random and opened it. He saw that the first page was printed with the words "Printed by Shanghai Dachshund Bookstore in the Republic of China." Following Mr. Song's instructions, he opened the second row of bookcases. There were not many books in them. After looking through them, he found the one called New Theory, Xin Shen chapter. The book was obviously a few years old. After Su Tong opened it and read 2 pages, he couldn't help but frowned. It was just because most of the words in the book were in classical Chinese or traditional Chinese characters, which he was not used to. Fortunately, there is a translation of the annotations written by Mr. Song on the side. Just as he was flipping back casually, he suddenly looked startled and saw an invitation card with a blue shimmer hidden in the pages. This time the invitation card had a blue background, but it was covered with bright red handprints. Turning around and looking, I saw a rotten head, glaring over with a ferocious face, as if it wanted to pounce out from inside and bite itself. Interesting. Looking at this invitation card, Su Tong began to look forward to it. Compared with the tasks and rewards in the script world, he cares more about the process of the story itself. In the last script, because of Yang Zixuan and the others, he was not able to fully experience the story itself. Fortunately, The final ending was better than he expected. Be good. But this time, his strength has been greatly improved, and he is looking forward to what the script world will be like this time. Thinking of this, he put away the invitation card and sat outside the door with his book in his arms to read. About an hour later, Mr. Song came back with a cane. He saw Su Tong sitting there reading a book and nodded happily. "How's it going? Are you curious?" Mr. Song sat down on a chair nearby and looked sideways at Su Tong. He was originally worried about whether what he did just now would scare him, but now it seems that his worries are somewhat unnecessary. Su Tong didn't answer and nodded with a smile. "Well, I thought I would pass it on to you after a few years, but I'm getting older and I might not be able to see the sun tomorrow. I might as well teach you in advance. Anyway, your basic skills are solid. Didn't you make a little paper man last night? Show it to me." As soon as he heard that Mr. Song wanted to see his work, Su Tong immediately realized what the old man meant, and immediately ran to the woodshed, then took the fat man out of the prop book and showed it to the old man. Mr. Song glanced twice and took out a pack of cigarettes from his arms. Seeing this, Su Tong quickly took out his cigar. Unfortunately, Mr. Song glanced at it and shook his head. "I can't get used to smoking this kind of foreign stuff." Then he lit a cigarette and picked up the fat man. "Hey, don't tell me, he really looks like a fat grandson." When he said this, his eyes darkened for a moment, but he quickly hid it again, hugging the fat man and praising him repeatedly. "Yes, it's really well done. It's just that the face is not full enough. You can use sandpaper to rub it here a few times later, and the face will look better. And this, you need to pay attention to the corners of your mouth. When you speak, you need to have a sense of tension. You need to learn to hide it. Later, use a knife to cut off a little of the excess. No matter how well made the paper man's face is, it won't really smile. It will look exactly how it is made, so you must learn to hide the mouth so that when viewed from different angles, the smile will make sense. It's okay. Take a look at the temple to see how the Buddha's face is opened inside." Mr. Song taught patiently, while Su Tong kept learning from the side. Seeing that it was almost done, Mr. Song asked him to go to the writing brush on the desk in the room. In our line of work, the paper man's eyes are not open, because the finishing touches are effective, and the paper man's eyes are fierce. But if you don't add the eyes, the paper man will also have no intelligence. The key depends on how you do it. Take out the black blood today. Mr. Song asked him to take out the black blood. His pen tip touched it a little, and then he made 2 strokes. Immediately, he saw that the black blood spread into 2 bright black dots in his eyes like human pupils. In an instant, Su Tong realized that the fat man in front of him was different. He had a strong feeling that the fat man seemed to be staring at him. His dark pupils seemed to be like human eyes, reflecting the aura of humanity. This feeling is hard to describe, but when you look at those eyes, it gives people a real feeling of staring. "Oh, what a great grandson. Ha 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 ha." Mr. Song held the fat man in his arms and played with him, as if this was not a paper man at all, but a living person. The wrinkles on his face full of vicissitudes of life were about to be squeezed together. Looking at Mr. Song's gray hair on his temples, he felt a little uncomfortable. 2 more days passed in the blink of an eye. In the past 2 days, Mr. Song has been asking Su Tong to recite incantations every day. At the same time, he also did not forget to teach him some slang in the world, also called Mensa dialect. When he mentioned this matter, Mr. Song's eyes darkened, his cloudy eyes flashed with a cold light, and he reached out and patted Su Tong on the shoulder. Fortunately, Su Tong instinctively ducked to the side, allowing Mr. Song to miss the shot. He looked at Mr. Song with confusion on his face, and saw a smile on Mr. Song's face. "Okay, remember, no matter who it is in the future, you can't even let him tap you on the shoulder." As he spoke, he sighed, Your master was careless back then. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. After he came back, he fell seriously ill and passed away in less than a winter. So evil. Su Tong was shocked. He had seen his master with his own eyes. Although I have never seen master take action, the invisible sense of oppression cannot be compared to someone like Huo Ying. It is too mysterious to be killed by being tapped on the shoulder. Seeing the horrified look on his face, Mr. Song narrowed his eyes and told him some evil methods in the world. For example, sitting on the immortal pile, summoning souls, etc. These things are difficult to guard against. Some of them don't even have names, and they only rely on word of mouth among teachers. Some masters will never pass on secrets to their disciples until they die, even to their own sons. What he was afraid of was that the apprentice would inadvertently do this to him. When your master was in junior high school, he was sitting on the immortal pile. The other party was your master's enemy. I'm afraid he should have died long ago. This kind of person, when you are not paying attention, taps your shoulder and steals a point of popularity from you. From then on, as long as he casts a spell, you will feel like someone is sitting on you every night, getting heavier and heavier. It will make you unable to eat and sleep well, your body will become weaker and weaker, and you will eventually die. It's so weird. Is there no way to solve it? Su Tong asked in shock. Mr. Song covered his forehead, hiding the tears in the corners of his eyes, and said in a trembling voice, "There must be some, but few people know how to solve this evil method. Our family was in a big disaster at that time. Where should I go? What kind of expert are you looking for?" After talking for a while, Mr. Song seemed to be tired. He covered his forehead and went back to the room to rest, leaving Su Tong alone sitting on the chair and thinking. His big script mission progress in the Age of Panic seems to be related to the Master's era, and he doesn't know if he will encounter such evil magic by then. After nightfall, Su Tong covered Mr. Song with a quilt, sorted out the prop book, and made sure that he brought enough things this time, and even brought 2 boxes of instant noodles. Until the grid in the props book was almost filled, dong, dong, dong. The hour hand of the clock pointed to 12 o'clock, and the deep sound of the bell began to ring. As the bell rang, Su Tong walked out of the room and took a look. Under the night sky, huge neon lights flashed with blood-red lights, wishing to light up the night sky. At the same time, urging prompts began to sound in his ears. A new round of script world is about to begin. Please go to the lobby to assemble this time. Attention, the actors are asked to assemble as soon as possible before the script starts. Those who exceed the time limit will have 10 script points deducted per minute. If the script points are not enough, they will be eliminated. Hi Hu. Su Tong stood in front of the door, first took a deep breath, and then slowly exhaled it. When he raised his head again, his eyes couldn't help but sparkle, and his black eyes were as hot as fire. He put on the headphones and gently pressed the play button. The figure wandered in the darkness, farther and farther away, until it completely disappeared. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 78. Ding. Pushing open the door, Su Tong didn't hear the sweet welcome this time and turned his head to look. Good guy, his cute little sister stared at her with a cold face. What was strange was that she was covered in a very large robe, completely covering her body. After seeing Su Tong, those big eyes glared at him, as if they wanted to eat him alive. Ahem, I understand. I feel uncomfortable for a few days every month. Realizing that the situation was not good, Su Tong cleared his throat and stepped forward. Otherwise, when you get off work, we can go, eat hot pot together. Ah. The young lady curled her lips and said, "You'd better worry about yourself." As she spoke, she pursed her lips in the direction of the hall, only to see several people already sitting sparsely in the hall. Obviously the difficulty of the script is directly related to the number of people. The first time it was a novice script, it was not very difficult, and everyone was given a prop for free. The second time was a small-scale script, with a strong team as the forward. Although it was a breeding team, the script studio didn't care about that. But this time, the difficulty has obviously escalated. After Su Tong glanced quickly, he found that 7 people were already sitting in the hall, 8 including himself. He remembered that he had learned about script killing before. Usually, a larger and more difficult script would have more than 8 people. If I were you, while there is still time, I would consider getting rid of that thing in my hand as soon as possible in exchange for a life-saving trump card. Su Tong raised his eyebrows and took out the prepared cake from the props book unhurriedly and put it on the table. What if I don't? Then be careful not to die in it. She glanced at the cake on the table and couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She saw that the cake actually looked like an airplane, with a dancing little man on it. Although there were no facial details, the clothes on the child are obviously very similar to those of the villain. Then it's settled. If I come back alive, let's eat hot pot together. Su Tong slapped the table, turned around and walked towards the hall. Hey! Seeing him leave without looking back, she was stunned for a moment. She lowered her head to look at the cake on the table, and moved her face closer to admire the little man on the plane. Smug. As he spoke, he glanced around to make sure there was no one around. Under the light, he saw the shadow of the beautiful woman's side face. She slowly opened her mouth, opening it wider and wider. With a click, the marble tabletop shook uncontrollably. One more. Everyone in the hall raised their heads and focused their attention on this latecomer, and many people's faces began to look cold. 8-player difficulty, what a fool. Someone kicked the table away and began to complain, cursing and complaining. Others didn't look too good either. They had only heard about the 8-person script and had never experienced such a difficult script. But we also know that the number of people is the criterion that determines the difficulty of the script. 8-player difficulty is almost the ceiling of the small script world. Whoever encounters it will be unlucky. Su Tong sat on the single sofa at the back and glanced around, but he didn't see his familiar figure, and he couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He found that he was still quite nostalgic. He missed Li Bo, the fat man, and Sango, the heartless man. Now facing 7 strangers in front of him, he really felt a little nostalgic. Just when they were whispering about their bad luck. Jingle. The sound of pushing the door made everyone's faces freeze. Some people stiffened their necks and did not dare to look back. Some people raised their heads and looked at the figure walking in from the outside, and their faces instantly turned pale. Click, click, click. The sound of the collision between shoe soles and marble was getting closer and closer, as if this was not the sound of footsteps, but the death knell that the god of death was ringing for them. Huh? It's so late, and there are so many people. The new girl who walked in was young, wearing a white miga dress. She was pretty and cute, especially the dimples on her cheeks, and her smile was very sweet. Sensing that something was not right about the atmosphere in the hall, the girl said hello to everyone. Big guy, my name is Song Nuanuan. This is my second time here to play. Please take care of me. Her voice is very sweet, just like her name, giving people a warm and friendly feeling, just like the little sister next door. Anyone who sees it will smile in response. It's just, at this moment, when everyone saw her, no one could laugh. Some people even started to get dark in front of their eyes, covering their heads. Wrong, wrong, what else are we playing? 9-person difficulty. The air seemed to be frozen there, no one said anything, and there were only 2 words in everyone's eyes: despair. In such a desperate atmosphere, it is obvious that no one will pay attention to a rookie like Song Nuanuan. Clatter. Su Tong took out the cigar and lighter, cut off the butt of the cigar, held the cigar with his index finger and thumb, and slowly turned it in front of the fire. When the flame burned 1/3 of the front end of the cigar, he blew it gently. After the flame is blown out, continue to slowly bake it again until the inside of the cigar is grilled and carbonized. The skillful movements are like those of a veteran who has been immersed in this art for many years. His action naturally caused a chain reaction. After all, cigarettes are the best medicine to relieve anxiety in a short period of time. It's a pity that many people only have time to put the cigarette to their mouths, but don't have time to take a puff. Kick 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 kick. With the harsh sound of the door opening, the host they knew and hated finally appeared on the stage. Su Tong looked at the host's new makeup and couldn't help but put the cigar to his mouth and took a deep breath. Interesting. Pop. The small black leather whip hit the ground, causing sparks to pop out. The tights that hugged her body perfectly showed off her devilish figure. Under a German military hat, a black eye patch and red lips as red as blood made her look even more wild. Many people present were already very familiar with this host, but when they saw her exaggerated new look, their jaws dropped in shock. After all, in many people's minds, she always seems to be wearing a luxurious cheongsam, with a dignified yet charming style. The host seemed to be very satisfied with the expressions on everyone's faces, and waved the whip in his hand. Congratulations to everyone, the 9-person script. I remember the last time it appeared, but it was still 2 years ago. I remember 2 years ago. There was a man who got clues to the golden props in that script. It was really a wonderful story. She fiddled with the leather whip in her hand with her slender fingers and spoke to everyone in a seductive tone. Sure enough, when they heard the words golden props, many people's eyes changed. People die for money and birds die for food. This is obviously a truth that has not changed since ancient times. It's like knowing that drug trafficking involves eating peanuts, but a steady stream of people still take this road every year. The 4 words golden props bring endless temptation and magic. Even if it's just a clue, once you have it, it's like a god, with the power to break all rules. Of course, there are still some people who are self-aware, and they dare not get involved in golden props, but there is still a flash of fantasy in their hearts. What if? This fantasy doesn't have much effect, but it is enough to offset part of their fear. Seeing that the goal had been achieved, the host waved the small leather whip in his hand and pointed at the tunnel corridor behind him. Everyone, please. Everyone glanced at the corridor in front of them and swallowed hard. Everyone knew that the world behind this corridor might be death. But do they have a choice? Thinking of this, someone finally braved the situation and walked in quickly. Anyway, there is no choice, so why not go to the front and maybe take advantage of the choice of identity? If there is one, there are 2. Everyone understands the truth. Soon the 3rd, 4th, and those further behind began to pace faster, and there was even a feeling of being swarmed up. Su Tong followed unhurriedly, and when he reached the tunnel, he was stopped by the host with a small whip. There's 1 minute left, are you sure you don't want to sell? If you nod now, I can make the decision and give you a privilege. Maybe you have a chance to get gold props and become the winner of this game. The seductive sound as gentle as a finger can make one's bones feel numb. Su Tong looked a little embarrassed. He glanced at the corridor in front of him and frowned tightly. He took 2 puffs on his cigar. I want to sell, but my teacher who has been dead for many years taught me to be honest when doing business, so, I'm sorry, I started 2 hours later. I won't accept a small business like yours. He flicked the ashes on his hand and said, this brand of cigars tastes great. A beautiful woman smokes a cigar, and it goes well with your thief outfit. The host was stunned for a moment, then looked down at the cigar in his hand, with a stiff smile still on his face. He turned back to look at Su Tong's running back, and casually dropped the cigar on the ground. This bastard. At the end of the corridor is still the familiar portal. But this time there is a sign hanging on every door. Good guy. Bad guy. Under each brand, there corresponds to an identity. There are 9 doors here, and there are 5 good people and 4 bad people inside. The host stepped on black high heels and came from behind everyone. As he walked, he explained, as you can see, choose to be a good person or choose to be a bad person. It's that simple. You can choose now, but the door must be opened at the same time, only then can you open it and enter. So doesn't it mean that each of us knows whether the other is a good person or a bad person? Someone suddenly became suspicious. Some people immediately said, wait a minute, won't our appearance be changed when we enter the script world? What's the point of such a choice? Sorry, no comment. The host played with the small leather whip in his hand and seemed not to want to reveal any information to them in this regard. Seeing this, everyone looked at each other and saw someone quickly rushing towards the direction of the bad guy. Obviously, there are only 4 bad guys, but there are 5 good guys. If you have played werewolf, you will know that although there are only 2 wolves, they have the advantage of hiding in the crowd. In other words, the bad guys always have the upper hand. And for 4 against 5, they didn't suffer. After all, don't forget that there is a sweet-looking rookie among the 9 people. There is no reason for such a little rookie to choose a bad guy who is the enemy of everyone. So the result is 4 versus 4. If this little rookie can hold back appropriately. The positions of the 4 bad guys were quickly occupied, and the slow-moving person could only stand in the good guy's position with a dark face and silence. The host looked around with his one eye and made sure everyone was standing in the correct position. Then, the game begins. Buzz. The door opened in response. When everyone entered the room, and as the door closed again, the host's eyes showed a sly cold light. Sorry, it's only officially starting now. As he spoke, he flicked his fingers, and the signs on the door in front of him were quickly turned over. There were neither good people, nor bad people, nor even a word on the flipped door signs, just a touch of gray. Let's code one more time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 80. Bang 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 bang. Under the harsh slamming of the door, Su Tong slowly opened his eyelids and looked at the ceiling above his head. He saw a row of empty countdown numbers on the empty ceiling. Bang 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 bang. Before he understood what it meant, the banging on the door came again, and then he could hear a woman yelling, "Asshole, you little bastard, you owe me 1 month's rent, can you still rent it? If not, pack up your things and get out immediately, this is not a shelter." Bang 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 bang, open the door, Sunset, you little bastard, I know you are at home. Open the door. The banging on the door continued, and the dilapidated door panel was crumbling, making people wonder how long the door could survive such a violent blow. What are you knocking? You're crazy. It's only 6 o'clock in the morning. Are you crazy? This is my door. I can knock as much as I want. I don't get up at 6 in the morning. You old man likes to sleep so much. You sleep in urns. You can sleep as long as you want. Oh, Aunt Wang, please stop knocking. My baby finally fell asleep. Your little one is Jingui. Your little one has been crying all night. What the hell are you going to do for a living? I don't think your house is a nuisance to the people, but you still dare to bother me knocking on the door in the morning. I'm not used to other people pampering you. Believe it or not, I'll buy a floor shaker and let's get together at night and sleep with your mother and have fun. You, how can you talk like this? I have tolerated you for a long time. Don't go too far. I tell you. I have tolerated you for a long time. You go out late and come back late every day. Your wife cuckolds you at home. The whole building knows about it, but you don't know. I went through your garbage bags and found 7 helmets a day. There seemed to be a quarrel outside the door, but it was obvious that Mrs. Wang, as the landlord, was full of firepower, and the surrounding neighbors seemed to have no enemies. But Su Tong didn't get up obediently because of the noise outside and choose to calm the matter. Instead, he lay sideways on the bed and looked up and down at this small room, which was less than 20 square meters. It flashed through his mind that after he entered the room, he opened the iron box on the table. However, unexpectedly, the moment the iron box was opened, countless pairs of rotten palms dragged him into the abyss. After waking up, it was obvious that he had officially entered the script world. Many scattered memories emerged in his mind. After simply sorting these fragmented memories in his mind, he finally figured out his current identity. My current identity is called Yu Hui, a sophomore in high school with unknown parents, no memory. The house I rent now is an old-fashioned tube building. The so-called Tongzi Tower is a long corridor with many single rooms connected in series. Because the long corridor is ventilated at both ends and looks like a tube, it is named Tongzi Tower. This old-fashioned tube building is 7 stories high, has aging facilities, no elevators, densely populated residents, and a mixed bag of residents. The environment can only be described as dirty and messy. As for the property, a month ago, the municipal government arranged a property here, but they didn't hold on for half a month and fled in a hurry. But such a tube building has many advantages. The rent is cheap. You can rent such a single room for only 300 yuan. And the location happens to be close to the center of the city, so it will also be the best choice for office workers. Aunt Wang outside the door, unfortunately, is the biggest landlord here, and she owns 1/3 of the house in the Tongzi building. She is a proper tenant and has also bought a small supermarket downstairs. This is also the confidence for her to fight with the heroes. What? Beat her? Don't be kidding. It is said that Aunt Wang is also a women's weightlifting champion who retired. With a height of 1.85 meters, he can hold 3 bags of flour weighing 50 kilograms each in one hand and 2 on his shoulders. Beat her? With all these old, weak, sick, and disabled people, I am afraid that the 3 of them together may not be heavier than the barbell at home. The above is all the information about this script world in my head. By the time he had sorted out the information, it had already become quiet outside the door, and Aunt Wang's voice could not be heard. He doesn't even have 300 yuan. This guy is miserable enough. Su Tong looked in the mirror. His pale face, messy hairstyle, and especially the wrinkled short sleeves on his body that had been washed out of shape, made him scream that he couldn't bear it, he couldn't bear it. Just when he was about to call out his prop book and change into a set of clothes, something unexpected happened to him. When he tried to summon the prop book, the expected prop book did not appear. Instead, there was a cold prompt in his ear. Sorry, your prop book is temporarily frozen. When you complete a main or side mission, you can randomly unlock a prop card. Hearing such a reminder also surprised him. For the sake of this script space, I stuffed a lot of things into it, but I didn't expect that now I can't summon the prop book. Not only that, the passive increases brought by the prop cards in his prop book have all disappeared. Is this the 9-player difficulty start? Thinking of this, it also explains why everyone's faces were so stretched and angry when they saw the 9-person difficulty. After all, for the vast majority of players, without the prop book, they have no backbone. Without the backbone, it's natural that you won't be able to get hard. But what made him happy was that all the physical bonuses he had received were still there, and when he raised his hand, he saw a simple ring on his middle finger. Star Eye Catastrophe. After this ring is powerfully amplified, it cannot be put into the prop book and can only be worn on the body, so there is a risk of being robbed. However, at this moment, who would have thought that this shortcoming would actually become its advantage? Because it cannot be stored in the prop book, the ring has not been sealed. Doesn't this mean that you have an extra usable prop card for nothing? Although this ring does not have powerful skills. But don't forget, it also has two very useful passives, Sensator and Dark Vision. Not to mention those who feel it, the ability of Dark Vision alone will bring great convenience and advantages to oneself. At this time, he looked up at the countdown clock hanging above his head. I don't know what this countdown means, but looking at the rapidly shortening time, I always have a bad feeling in my heart. Buzz, buzz. At this time, the cell phone on the table rang. He picked it up and saw the word monkey written on the caller ID. After thinking about it for a while, I found a memory about the monkey. It took me a moment to remember that the monkey was called Ma Yongchao and seemed to be his best friend. The two were good brothers who grew up together. Ma Yongchao is 1 year older than him, but he is smaller than him. His thin body may really give him talents in certain aspects. This guy has liked climbing since he was a child, and even more so when he grows up. Parkour adventure. Because he was too thin, everyone called him Monkey. After pressing the answer button, a monkey's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Hurry up, we agreed to be at 10 o'clock, why haven't you arrived yet?" Su Tong thought hard and it seemed that the two of them had agreed to work part-time together today. "I'll be there soon." Su Tong glanced sideways at the countdown above his head and found that there were only 30 seconds left in the countdown. Looking at the shrinking numbers, he suddenly felt a very uncomfortable feeling in his heart, so he decisively said to the monkey, "I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well today. You can go alone." "Oh, why do you always miss the key moments?" "No more talking, I'll go first." After hanging up the phone, Su Tong stared at the numbers that kept beating in front of him. He became increasingly wary. He stood by the window and could see the garden behind through the curtains. "I can't help but think of many possibilities in my mind: earthquake, gas explosion, fire." However, as the countdown ends, Su Tong stood in the room silently holding his breath, but as time passed by, none of the scenes he expected appeared. When I looked again, the weird countdown was gone. The countdown is confusing and I have no idea what it means. Bang! Bang bang! At this moment, there was a crisp knock on the door. Could it be that Aunt Wang is back to kill us again? He frowned, and he had already imagined in his mind that Aunt Wang's body of 1.85 meters and that big mouth were just like the look of Grandma Jo in the movie The 7th Grade Sesame Official when she came to the door and cursed, domineering. Standing sideways in front of him, he looked like he was raising an army to accuse him. Bang! Bang! The knock on the door came again. When Su Tong stretched out his hand and was about to open the door, he suddenly felt something was wrong. The 10 thick fingers of Aunt Wang in his memory could not knock such a small sound. The dilapidated door was not equipped with a peephole at all. He leaned towards the crack of the door and looked out, and a pure white skirt appeared in his sight. Looking up, a woman was standing in front of her house with her head lowered, her body shaking as if she was sobbing. Is her. He has this woman's identity in his memory, Sister Feng. Of course, this is not her name, but the name everyone calls her in private. The so-called one phoenix on the first floor. This woman is the only Sister Feng in this tube building. Just now, Mrs. Wang mentioned that she was the wife who wore 7 hats with men in one day. Could it be that the man came home in a rage and beat her? He guessed in his mind. But why did she come to him? Su Tong carefully searched for the remaining memories in his mind. However, Yu Hui is just a poor student who can hardly afford to eat. He usually blushes just by looking at such a charming Sister Feng, so how can he dare to interact with her? If the only intersection between the two is, it is that when Yu Hui surfs in bed every night, the figure of Sister Feng will appear in his mind. At this moment, it seemed that Su Tong had not heard the sound of opening the door for a long time, and the woman suddenly raised her head. Su Tong's heart tightened. Under the thick hair, he saw a face that had been chewed to pieces. The eyeball on the left side had exploded. His body was twitching from time to time. The face was close to the door, as if he was listening. As if watching, for a moment, the woman suddenly started banging the door with her head. "Sorry, I wrote until 4 o'clock last night. I couldn't even lift my eyelids. I really couldn't sleep. I just finished eating." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 81. Boom. The fierce banging on the door made the whole door tremble violently. Su Tong frowned and sat back on the bed, not caring at all whether her head could open the door. After all, compared to Aunt Wang's pair of 80-inch hammers, Sister Feng's little head is obviously not that bad at all. At this time, the noise outside began to become more and more harsh, and screams and cries came from the park behind. Su Tong opened the curtains and took a look at the park below. There was a chaos in the park, and some people rushed forward, opening their mouths and biting like crazy. Zhizzy. Under the sound of rapid braking, there was a violent collision, and a moving bus suddenly rolled over and crashed into the sidewalk next to it. Boom. With a huge crash, the bus crashed into the door of a supermarket. As black smoke rose, some figures covered in blood emerged from the bus and began to rush towards those who were still there. Passers-by who want to rush forward to save people. A doomsday-like scene was unfolding in front of him. Su Tong glanced at the room in front of him from the corner of his eye and found that the only weapon in the room was the baseball bat. Buzz, buzz. At this time, the mobile phone in the pocket suddenly rang, and it was still a monkey. He pressed the answer button and heard the fierce breathing of a monkey's voice coming from the other end of the phone. He only heard him gasping and screaming, "Yahweh, don't come out, something happened, it's everywhere, whoops hoo hoo, the biting monster, beep." The voice on the phone stopped suddenly, as if the call had been hung up in a hurry. While the phone was hung up, a prompt sound from space came from the other end of the phone. Main Mission 1, Survivors. Mission Goal, survive for 72 hours. Mission Description, a sudden outbreak of the virus sweeps the world, spreading at lightning speed. Don't get bitten, be careful to be discovered. Under the first wave of the apocalypse, huddle in a corner and learn to be a mouse. Side Mission 1, close the door. Mission Goal, close the only door to the outside world in this community. Mission Description, this is the critical period for the disaster to break out. If you can close the gate of the upper community at this time, I believe that your survival probability will be much improved in the future. After putting down the phone, Su Tong was not paying attention to the task, but thought of the situation of the little monkey. I don't know if it's because I inherited some of Yu Hui's memories. Perhaps it was because Monkey still reminded him at this time that he actually began to miss Monkey, a child who was completely unfamiliar to him. At this time, the banging on the door had disappeared, and shadows kept flying past the window on the other side near the corridor. The rumble of footsteps echoed in the old corridor, like a torrent rolling out of your window. In the face of such a torrent, personal power will be reduced to the extreme in an instant. Even if the prop books of players like them were not frozen, no one would dare to fight head-on in the face of such a quantity. Soon, the corridor was filled with screams and roars. There were too many, and almost instantly, countless infected people began to appear around them. Snapped. Suddenly there was a sound of glass breaking, and a woman's scream was heard from outside the door, "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Su Tong carefully opened an imperceptible gap in the bed curtain, and carefully looked over to take a look. He saw diagonally across the street from the residence on the third floor. Their glass had been smashed. Several infected people didn't care whether the sharp glass would cut their bellies open, and rushed in one after another. There seemed to be a man in the room, desperately holding something against the window, but the screams of the women in the house were heartbreaking. Such screams are like a sex demon meeting a girl. Not only will it have no effect, but it will further stimulate the desire of these sex demons. When the infected people around heard the sound, they all rushed into the room immediately. Even the few infected people who were wandering outside his room suddenly turned around and rushed after the woman's scream. At this time, Su Tong suddenly saw a figure. Wearing a black hoodie, he quickly shuttled through the corridor on the opposite side of the corridor. His agility could be described as flying over walls and walking over walls. Player. Su Tong's heart moved when he saw the other party grabbing the fence of the corridor, swinging down, and easily stepping on the fence of the second floor. Yeah. After seeing his figure, the two infected people tilted their heads and rushed toward him. Seeing this, the other party raised his hand and raised the slingshot, aiming it at the glass of the room not far away. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the glass of the house in front of him was smashed to pieces, and the man in black jumped from the guardrail to the first floor. When the two infected people turned around and chased him again, they happened to pass by the house where the glass was smashed. Through the broken glass, they could see the two old people who were at a loss inside. The ready-made delicious food was right in front of them. How could the two infected people choose to stay away from them? Any pain? On the contrary, the collision they brought attracted all the remaining infected people on the second floor. Seeing this, Su Tong raised his brows slightly. He looked at the man in black and immediately understood what he wanted to do. It was a side mission to close the door. The door is not far ahead. As long as the door is closed, it is the best choice whether from the perspective of side tasks or the main plot of the next 72 hours. What's more, as long as you complete the side mission, you can randomly unlock a prop card. Such a temptation is naturally irresistible for players. But he obviously underestimated the number of infected people in this tube building. Such tube buildings are often used as resettlement rooms for employees in former government agencies. The rooms are not large, but the number is surprisingly dense. Even in a small house of 20 square meters, it is normal for a family of 3 to be crowded together. As soon as he landed, infected people rushed out from around him. Seeing the infected person rushing towards him, his expression changed. After rolling on the spot to avoid the opponent's attack, he raised his hand and hit the infected person with a slingshot. The steel ball directly penetrated the infected person's eyeball without any bias. But such a penetrating injury only caused the infected person's body to sway a few times, and he soon pounced on him again. And in the small room on the other side, 2 more infected people actually ran out. They looked like the first couple in age, but most of the man's neck had been eaten away. The 2 of them walked a few steps and twitched all over, but when they saw the man in front of the gate, they leaned forward, tapped their toes, and rushed towards him quickly. Seeing 3 infected people rushing towards them, the man in black turned pale instantly. He raised the slingshot in his hand and shot at the 3 infected people quickly. However, it seemed that because of the rhythm, 2 of the 3 steel balls only hit the infected people, and 1 actually missed. The infected person closest to him rushed towards him, but he dodged sideways, but the infected person's hand grabbed the hood behind his neck and pulled hard. The huge strength completely exceeded that of a normal person, causing the man in black to be caught off guard and fall to the ground. He saw a mouthful of blood biting down on him. Boom! A whistling sound of wind came from the side, knocking away the infected person who was pressing on him. The man in black was startled and looked up, only to see a young man holding a baseball bat and raising his hand to hit another infected person on the head. Close the door quickly. Su Tong did not look at him and rushed towards the infected person in front of him. The advantage of 20% enhancement in overall physical fitness was particularly important at this moment. Whether it is the reaction of the body's muscles or the increase in strength and speed, there is a significant improvement. Facing the female infected person who rushed towards him, Su Tong turned around suddenly, swung the baseball bat in his hands with both hands, and hit her chin with a standard American home run from bottom to top. Snapped. She raised her head in the sun, and her body flew backwards. The blood droplets were mixed with a few broken teeth, and she fell heavily to the ground. Coincidentally, the back of her head hit the bulge on the ground. On the iron screw. Those were the fixed poles left by the property management company last month when they planned to install a water dispenser in the community. However, after the property management company evacuated from the community in despair, the water dispenser project was naturally put on hold, leaving only 4 fixed poles on the ground. Rusty screw. Poof, the 30-centimeter screw penetrated from between her eyebrows. After her body twitched a few times, there was no more movement. However, Su Tong glanced at the baseball bat broken into 2 pieces in his hand, twitched the corner of his mouth, and muttered to himself, "Can't you buy a better one?" "Okay, let's go." The man in black quickly closed the door, inserted the door latch, quickly twisted a few marijuana flowers into the keyhole of the door latch with a slender wire, and called Su Tong to leave. But what they didn't expect was that several infected people had already rushed downstairs. What's even more unexpected is that there was a rumble in the corridor, and more than a dozen infected people actually poured out. These infected people obviously solved the bait of the man in black, and then rushed out with the newly infected bait. "Come down. I suck." Seeing more than a dozen infected people rushing downstairs in front of him, the man in black suddenly turned dark when he realized that he was trapped in a cocoon. "Call." Suddenly there was a violent sound of breaking wind, and an infected person who had just jumped down the stairs seemed to have been hit in the head by something, and his plasma exploded on the spot. Su and Tong took a closer look and saw that it was actually a pure iron barbell. "Why are you still standing there? Why don't you come in quickly?" With a loud roar, the two looked back and saw Aunt Wang holding a barbell in front of the supermarket door. An infected person looked back. Her eyes glowed instantly, as if the strong Aunt Wang in front of her was a super burger exuding fragrance. A sharp cry came out of his mouth and he rushed towards her. However, the virus gave them courage, but it also took away their intelligence. Looking at the infected person in a suit and leather shoes, Aunt Wang used the lever in her hand to teach him the final lesson. She didn't move her body, she picked up the lever in her hand and smashed it. Although the lever was in Aunt Wang's hand, it was neither thick nor heavy, but in fact, the standard for such a lever was 20 kilograms. Sweeping it up with a stick, just the sound of breaking wind made people's scalp numb. Bang, there was a muffled sound. The infected person flew backwards 5 or 6 meters away. When they looked again, the two of them couldn't help but gasped. They saw that the infected person's head had turned into Sakuma. After dinner, I can do 2 more updates tonight. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 82. The two of them were stunned for a moment. After all, an ordinary person's power was so amazing, which really made players like them feel ashamed. But soon the two of them came back to their senses and accelerated towards Aunt Wang. Su Tong took a quick step and avoided the attack of the infected person in front of him. He raised his hand and inserted the baseball bat that was broken into 2 pieces into the opponent's mouth. The man in black kept raising the slingshot in his hand, and the steel balls drew arcs in the air, hitting the infected people's eyeballs accurately. The two of them rushed forward with almost all their strength and plunged into the supermarket behind Aunt Wang. Crash. After Aunt Wang swept away the infected people in front of her with a stick, she pulled the iron door through and neatly put the lock on the door handle. No matter how hard the infected people behind them banged on the door, there was nothing they could do. The sound of "pa pa pa" made the iron door sway. But Su Tong and the man in black felt extremely comfortable sitting on the ground. Side mission, closing the door has been completed. When you complete the side mission, you can randomly unlock a prop card. Following the reminder sound in his ears, Su Tong couldn't help but raise his heart, looking forward to the item card that could be unlocked for him, preferably the paper craftsman's book so that he could call out the fat man. The little fat guy with rough skin and thick flesh can definitely beat the parents of these infected people to the point where they don't even recognize him. However, he was disappointed. The prop card that was unlocked first was actually my own title card Retributor. Jesus! Before he could complain, the man in black had already covered his head. Are you kidding me? He was also unlucky. He tried his best to unlock a prop card first to enhance his ability to protect himself, but by coincidence, it turned out to be an auxiliary prop card. Boom! The heavy steel pole hit the two of them hard. Su Tong's heart skipped a beat, and then he remembered that he seemed to still owe the Aunt Wang in front of him 1 month's rent. He raised his head and saw Aunt Wang looking at him with a half smile, stretching out her thick fingers. Hey! You! I thought you were going to die, and said, you owe me the rent now, or should I throw you out? Su Tong looked at Aunt Wang's broad face and hesitated for 30 seconds, ahem, can I promise you my life? When the man in black on the side heard this, he suddenly took a breath of cold air. From the corner of his eye, he carefully glanced at the body of Mrs. Wang in front of her, which was like a mountain of meat. He silently gave a thumbs up in his heart and said to himself, she is a person who can do great things. Aunt Wang was obviously stunned by the sentence and thought to herself, isn't this my line? After a moment, Aunt Wang laughed and patted Su Tong's little head with her thick palm. Silly boy, I don't like what you say. As he said that, he put the barbell aside and said, let's talk about it first. With that said, Aunt Wang greeted the two of them to come in, and through an iron gate, they were in front of the supermarket run by Aunt Wang. There was no shortage of food, water, fruits, and even daily necessities. Aunt Wang pointed at the fruits and said, if you want to eat, you can take it yourself. You can't keep these. As she said this, she motioned to Su Tong and the others to follow her to the second floor. At this time, Su Tong noticed that every time Aunt Wang went upstairs, her left leg was always uncoordinated and seemed to be disabled. The two of them walked upstairs and saw that several rooms on the second floor were connected together. There were no doors and the only window faced the park behind to increase the lighting effect. Half of it was used as a warehouse, and the other half was Aunt Wang's residence, with several photos hanging on the wall. Su Tong looked around and saw that the protagonist in the photo was holding a barbell as big as a truck tire with both hands. The veins on his forehead were bulging, as if he was a giant standing tall on the sky and the earth. It can be seen that Aunt Wang in the photo was still very young at that time, and her body was not as bloated as it is now. Especially this photo of me standing on the podium. Aunt Wang was seen holding flowers and gold medals, with a bright smile on her face, which was in sharp contrast to the depressed expressions on the faces of the Russian and Japanese players who were standing much shorter. Don't look at it, it's all old almanac. Seeing Su Tong staring at the photo, Aunt Wang couldn't help but urge him to follow him. Then he rummaged through an iron cabinet and said, this is for you to use for self-defense. A machete was given to Su Tong, and an iron spear was also found by her and handed to the man in black. Sister Wang, what are you? The man in black held a spear and asked curiously, but he was worried in his heart whether this was a sign of driving them away. Aunt Wang sat down on the sofa, took out a can of ice-cold Coke from the refrigerator nearby, opened the drink and took a sip before saying, do me a favor, you can take whatever you want here. What? The man in black asked with narrowed eyes. There is a child living in room 2103 on the left side of the 4th floor. His name is Xiaoqinzi. He is the child of my good friend. I want you to save him. As soon as Aunt Wang finished speaking, a prompt sounded in the ears of Su Tong and the man in black. Trigger side mission, rescue. Mission goal, Xiaoqinzi, the child in room 2103, tries to rescue the target person. Mission description, you have to pass between the 1st and 3rd floors. Unfortunately, room 2103 is in the middle of the Tongzi building. Be careful, you may not be able to come back after this. Aunt Wang took another sip of Coke as she spoke, looking at the two of them as if waiting for their answer. Is it just the two of us? The man in black looked at the spear in his hand. He didn't know what era it was from. The tip of the spear was already rusty. You can imagine how difficult it would be for just the two of them to fight all the way to the fourth floor and bring a child down. Although completing side missions can unlock the ability of prop cards. But this was obviously looking for death. He had just closed the door and had already taught him a vivid lesson. Now they were all ordinary people, at most a little better than ordinary people. If Aunt Wang were added, they might still have hope, but just the two of them. When the man in black thought of this, he couldn't help but glance at Su Tong aside and the machete in his hand. Yes, it's just you two. If you don't go, get out of here. Aunt Wang was obviously not begging them politely. This was obviously a deal, and she couldn't tolerate their rejection. Even though they had weapons in their hands, the man in black didn't have any confidence in his heart when facing Aunt Wang, who could beat someone's head into a sakama with one stick. Can you wait any longer? With the situation outside now, aren't you asking me to die? The man in black whispered. Although there were no windows facing the corridor in the room, they could hear the screams from the corridor while standing in the room. If they rush out now, with their current strength, they will definitely die. No. Aunt Wang obviously didn't like the man in black and glared at him. Chenzi is a little in poor health. He has to take medicine every day. I deliver the medicine to him every day. If you want to delay the time on purpose, then there's no need for me to keep you here. This. The man in black lowered his head, and the fingers holding the spear gradually tightened. Tonight? We will set off when it gets dark. At this time, Su Tong finally spoke. It's dark. The man in black stared, but Su Tong glanced at him and said, yes, it's dark. Then just wait until dark. Hearing Su Tong speak, Aunt Wang's face showed joy. In other words, she didn't expect the man in black from the beginning. After all, when the man in black came downstairs, she used a slingshot to break other people's windows. Inside. This is why she handed the machete to Su Tong instead of to the man in black. The man in black wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say even when he opened his mouth. He could only drag Su Tong aside angrily. Are you crazy? Or the props you just unlocked are enough? Let's kill each other in the dark, go up there and seek death. Then do you think we can survive by hiding? Su Tong turned his head and looked at him with a sneer, and asked, a 9-player difficulty script can allow you to find a place to lie comfortably for 72 hours. I think you are thinking about shit. Hearing this, the man in black fell silent. Yes, 72 hours sounds like a long time, but if you think about it carefully, it is only 3 days. If we just look at the mission literally, finding a place to hide for 3 days is not a problem at all, but is it really that simple? As Su Tong said, this is a difficult script for 9 people. So in his opinion, the literal meaning of this mission is more like a misleading trap. To understand this passage in reverse, it means that within 72 hours, you must unlock your own prop card as soon as possible and quickly improve your strength. Go up, or you'll be dead. Su Tong also figured out this truth early on, so he took the risk of going downstairs to help him. Otherwise, as soon as the small door is closed, as soon as he lies down on the bed, he sleeps in darkness. Isn't it delicious? The man in black is obviously not a rookie, otherwise he would not have dared to risk closing the door immediately. After hearing his explanation, it would be a lie to say that he is not enlightened. But then I thought about it, that was the 4th floor. The 3 floors above and the 3 floors below were all infected and wanted to kill them. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but shudder, and cursed in his heart why he was so unlucky, and why he had to participate in such a 9-person competition. Su Tong didn't rush him, the truth was there for him to think about. I walked downstairs, made a bowl of hot instant noodles and ate them first. Ever since my overall quality was improved by 20%, I always felt hungry very quickly. After a while, I felt like my stomach was empty. Su Tong had just made instant noodles, but before he could eat them, Su Tong suddenly felt his phone in his pocket vibrate a few times. He picked it up and saw that it was a message from the monkey. Seeing that it was a monkey, Su Tong suddenly felt a sense of comfort. After clicking on it, there was a MMS with a photo attached. Younghui, don't go out, the world is over. There is a photo attached to the text message, which needs to be clicked to read. After Su Tong clicked it, the reading ring continued to rotate for more than 10 seconds before he saw a blurry photo. The moment he saw the photo, Su Tong's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Take a break, think about the details, and continue updating later. Rush the duck. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 83. Although he had expected the world background of this terrible script, when he actually saw the photo, he couldn't help but be shocked by the photo in front of him. The angle of the photo shows that the monkey is hiding somewhere higher. The streets were actually densely packed with infected people, like an army of people, extending along the main road to the end of the city. The photo is not clear enough and cannot be clicked to enlarge, but the dense visual sense alone makes people feel an unprecedented sense of depression. Are you safe now? Su Tong edited another text message and sent it. He didn't dare to make a call, for fear that the phone's ringing would reveal the monkey's location. After a while, I saw that the monkey had replied. So, I'm climbing on the signal tower above the post office building. There are 5 or 6 more below. What do you call this thing? Is it still a human being? Fortunately, they can't climb up. Post office building. He thought for a while. Although he didn't know what the postal building in this script world looked like, in reality, the postal building in L City was still quite tall. The same goes for those who want to go to other places. After all, the postal service only costs money. In addition, signal towers are generally very high. Without professional tools, ordinary people cannot climb up them. That is to say, monkeys. He should be safe while hiding on them. The two didn't dare to talk much because who knew how long the phone could last. So the two agreed to report each other's safety at noon every day and turn off their phones the rest of the time. After turning off the phone, Su Tong sat on a chair, raised his chin with his hands, and began to think about his actions tonight. After about a while, the man in black also came down from upstairs. Seeing Su Tong staring at a bowl of instant noodles in a daze, he sat down next to him and said, I figured it out. You're right. Hiding means just waiting to die. Let's give it a try tonight. If we can complete the task, once I unlock my main ability, no matter how many infected people come, they will still be scum. The man in black looked proud, but he could see that this guy was just giving himself a shot in the arm. He didn't point it out but followed the words of the man in black. Yes, these infected people are actually not strong. Even if some old men and women become infected, it cannot change the fact that they are still slow in action. We have guys, it's not hard to take them out. Yes, I found that if I just smash their heads, they are completely ruined. The man in black nodded excitedly. Su Tong's analysis obviously boosted his morale. He stretched out his hand and introduced himself to Su Tong. My name is Ranger. Doctor. Su Tong stretched out his hand and shook it twice before letting go and started eating instant noodles. The ranger wasn't actually hungry, but seeing how deliciously he ate, he couldn't help but vomit, and he also drank a bucket of noodles, but they were just instant noodles. It always smells good, but actually tastes it, haha. So the ranger just took a few bites and didn't finish it? The ability I unlocked is called the Echo Ear. When activated, it can cover a range of 300 meters in diameter. No disturbance can be hidden from me. Taking advantage of the meal break, the ranger introduced his current abilities. After all, everyone's item cards are temporarily frozen. It is undoubtedly a wise choice to share information about each other's abilities. Unfortunately, title ability. Su Tong told the ranger about his title ability. After hearing his title ability, the ranger was stunned for a moment. Oh no, brother, you are awesome, double reduction, just go for this title, you go out and clap your hands in the future, I'm afraid you won't. You know how many teams are vying for you. What he said was not an exaggeration. The dual title reduction and exemption skills are definitely the best standard ability for MT. For this title, a team will definitely focus on supporting him so that he can grow as quickly as possible. After all, a powerful MT can bring an absolute sense of security to the team. The golden signature of any team is definitely not the captain, but the MT. In the battle between teams, as long as the two sides fight MT, their strength will be determined immediately. Even some famous teams, when everyone hears MT's name, they immediately give way. MT is so horizontal. Su Tong sat aside and listened to the ranger's words. He just smiled and did not express any opinions on this. In fact, he had no intention of taking this route at all, and he had no interest in blocking other people's guns. What's more, he already has a candidate for MT in his heart. It's the little friend lying in the hospital. It's better to leave this kind of limelight position to him. After the two chatted for a while, Su Tong casually found a corner and closed his eyes to rest. As for the ranger, he ran to the kitchen, found a whetstone and started sharpening his gun before the battle. Time passed by, from morning to afternoon, and the originally chaotic sounds outside began to subside. Even if I strained my ears to listen, I couldn't hear any screams. Kaka kaka. With the slight sound of the iron door pulling, Su Tong and Yuxia poked their heads out from left to right. The infected people who had gathered outside the door all chose to leave after finding that they could not open the iron door. Listen carefully, it is eerily quiet both inside and outside the courtyard. In fact, this is the inevitable result, because those who screamed were either torn into pieces or have become infected. In addition, the virus outbreak time is still in the morning. That is, about 10 minutes after Ant Wang knocked on the door. Most of the people who went out at this time were old men and a group of office workers. This also gave many people a chance to survive the first wave of the virus. It is now 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I believe that many people have learned to be smart and hide carefully after experiencing a desperate day. Those infected also began to slowly hibernate. This is why Su Tong must act at night. Be careful, if he has turned into those people, just kill him. Ant Wang stood behind the two of them and said with a somewhat complicated expression. Then he took out a bag and handed it to Su Tong. If there is a chance, I will give this bag to your door. Su Tong opened it and took a look. Inside was canned milk powder and some food. He remembered that the person living opposite his house was a young woman who seemed to have just given birth. As for the child's father, not even anyone in the yard had seen him, let alone him. Have chance. He carried the bag on his back. Whether they had a chance or not would depend on their luck. As he spoke, he picked up his sword and groped toward the stairs with the ranger. The sky was not completely dark yet, and there was some afterglow of the sun on the clouds in the distance. The ranger was walking in front, because he was holding a spear and couldn't use it at all from behind. Climbing up the stairs to the second floor, the two of them looked at each other. Su Tong groped in front and took a look into the corridor. He saw 3 figures lying in the dim corridor not far away, holding a corpse. It tastes delicious. Apparently it's time for dinner. Seeing this, Su Tong pointed to the steps, and the two of them continued to tiptoe up. Kick 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 kick. In the corner of the stairs, an infected person was holding the incense on his thigh and chewing it. However, if he looked carefully, wasn't it his own leg? But the infected person didn't seem to care about this and just held the thigh and gnawed on it. Puff. Suddenly a long hair passed through his forehead. The infected person stiffened and fell to the ground. He twitched a few times and then stopped moving. The ranger turned back and raised his head towards Su Tong, meaning, "Do you think my technique is clean or not?" Su Tong silently gave a thumbs up, indicating that he should continue moving forward. The two stepped on the steps and climbed to the fourth floor step by step. Carefully peeking out, the ranger's face suddenly showed joy, and he saw that there was not a single infected person in the empty corridor. This made him very excited. "I wish I had known it would go so smoothly, I wouldn't have had to worry and suffer for so long." Strangeness. Su Tong was also very strange. He glanced at the room with broken glass not far away and diagonally opposite, and couldn't help but feel suspicious. "Stop being weird and leave quickly." The ranger felt excited. As long as they took the child away, their mission would be completed. The thought that he would soon regain his strength made him feel energetic. The two of them bent over and walked to the door of room 2103. Su Tong took out the key given by Aunt Wang, quietly inserted it into the keyhole, and twisted it gently. Click. The two looked at each other and saw that after the door opened, the room was dark. The room was very small, almost the same as the room I rented. A bed, a small table, and a small wardrobe were almost all in the room, but when the two of them took a look, they didn't see any children. "It's not like that old lady remembered it wrong." The ranger looked around and saw no children. Su Tong approached the room with a knife in hand and glanced around the room. He first looked under the bed. After finding that there was no one under the bed, his eyes couldn't help but lock on the wardrobe. Instructing the ranger to close the door first, Su Tong gently knocked on the closet door, and sure enough, he heard a faint squirming sound coming from the closet. Both of them were relieved when they saw this. "Kid, come out quickly, we will take you away," the ranger whispered into the gap in the closet. After about a while, I saw the closet slowly open, and a small head poked out, eyes full of panic looking at the two black figures in front of me. "Are you Xiaoqinzi?" Looking at the 7 or 8-year-old child in the cabinet, Su Tong asked. The boy nodded immediately. Seeing this, the ranger beside him was almost crazy with joy. This was simply an eye-opener from God. He didn't expect everything to go so smoothly. However, Su Tong frowned as he stood behind the ranger. Just as the ranger was about to take the child out and take him away as quickly as possible, Su Tong glanced out of the window, and suddenly his heart tightened. He held his hand down and made a silent gesture. The ranger raised his eyebrows, raised his head in confusion, and froze there instantly. Hiss. I didn't know when, but there were people standing outside the window. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 84. It's separated by curtains, but the light in the room is far darker than outside. Blurred figures stand in the corridor, and their shadows are reflected on the curtains. They look like a group of people looking in through the glass. People's scalp is numb. When the ranger screamed madly in his heart, and his whole body felt bad. What to do? The helpless ranger could only look at Su Tong, hoping that he would come up with a good idea. However, what Su Tong was thinking about at this moment was not this issue, but another matter. When they came up, there were obviously no infected people. Why did so many infected people suddenly pop up at this time? This couldn't help but make him feel worried. It seemed that these infected people were not completely out of ideas, or that there was someone controlling them behind their backs. If these infected people are really being directed by someone. Suddenly a chill came down, causing a cold light to appear in Su Tong's eyes. He turned around and walked to the cabinet, looking at the boy huddled in the cabinet. Are you really Xiaoqinzi? Yes. The boy clenched his fingers tightly and did not dare to raise his head. He always lowered his head and held his trousers tightly with his other hand. The closet was very dark, and the boy thought that others could not see his little moves, but little did he know that under Su Tong's dark vision, these little moves were simply self-inflicted. Seeing this, Su Tong no longer needed to ask any more questions. He stretched out his arm and pulled the child out of the closet. If you don't tell me, I will throw you out as bait. His voice was very soft, as if he said it casually. But in the man's ears, it was no less than a thunderbolt from the blue. He opened his mouth to shout, but Su Tong covered him tightly. At the same time, he said to the ranger, open the door, throw him out and let's go. This scene caused the boy to collapse instantly, tears streaming down his face, and shaking his head repeatedly. At this time, Su Tong let go of his hand and said coldly, I want to ask you one last time where Xiaoqinzi is. The boy pointed to the box above the wardrobe. I hid him in the box. After hearing what the boy said, Su Tong pulled down the curtains and motioned to the ranger to take down the small suitcase above. When they took the box down and took a look, Su Tong and Yuxia looked at each other and saw a child curled up in the box, trembling all over. That's right, it's him. Seeing his twitching appearance, the two people quickly took out the prepared medicine and gave it to Xiaoqinzi to take. After taking the medicine, Xiaoqinzi's body temperature gradually returned to normal and he slowly opened his eyelids. This made the ranger feel relieved immediately, but when he glanced at the other boy, his eyes turned evil. However, his intentions were naturally noticed by Su Tong, who patted him on the shoulder and said, don't worry, it's normal. The boy hid in the cupboard for who knows how long. He finally waited for someone to rescue him, but he was asked for someone else's name. Not to mention a timid child, even an adult would probably choose the same thing at this time. The way. Then what should we do now? Should we wait here for dawn? The ranger looked back at the shadows outside the window, feeling terrified. Of course we are looking for foreign aid. Su Tong took out his cell phone, clicked on the call history, and scrolled down 2 pages. Sure enough, they were all rent-driving calls from Aunt Wang, with the words stinky landlord written on them. After dialing the phone, about a few seconds later, Aunt Wang's voice came from the other end of the phone. After Su Tong briefly explained how they were trapped, Aunt Wang just said, wait. After saying that, she hung up the phone. The 4 people waited quietly in the room. In the dark room, everyone was like a diver. They only dared to take a small breath every time and unconsciously held their breath. No one can guarantee whether these infected people will suddenly smash the glass and rush in like crazy. Boom! Suddenly there was a roaring explosion that shook the entire glass. The huge rumbling sound, like water droplets dripping into boiling oil, suddenly woke up all the infected people around them. They let out a low scream from their mouths and rushed toward the source of the sound. The sound of shouting footsteps can make people feel panicky. Looking at the figures passing by outside the window, an elderly couple were tightly clustered together. The old man held his wife's head tightly and closed his eyes tightly. In another room, a woman was lying on the ground, holding a Bible in her hands, but still reciting Amitabha Buddha silently. It's okay, be good, baby, be good, baby. A young woman looked at the figure running past the window with a horrified expression, holding the baby in her arms tightly to her chest, for fear that he would make the slightest cry. Squeak boom! Brilliant fireworks suddenly exploded in the air, blooming with brilliant firelight in this silent night. Go quickly! Seeing the infected people outside the corridor being attracted away, Su Tong quickly opened the door and let the ranger walk in front, while he walked behind with a big knife. Rapid footsteps sounded in the corridor. There is only one word in everyone's head, run. In the past, It only took 5 or 6 steps to go downstairs, but today, I don't know why, but it always felt like it would never end. It was about to lead to the first floor. Suddenly the door on one side was pushed open, and a woman rushed out with her child in her arms. Save my child, is there a doctor? Save my child. The woman was the young woman who lived opposite Su Tong. As soon as she rushed out, she looked at the 4 people running down the stairs. The woman was stunned for a moment, screamed and rushed towards them, reaching out to grab the ranger. Quick, save my child, save my child. Stop making noise. The ranger's expression changed. When they rushed out, he had already activated his prop card Echo Ear to ensure early detection of danger along the way. The woman's scream had obviously caused the few infected people following to slow down. But the woman didn't care about this at all. She held up the baby in her arms and wanted the ranger to help him. Seeing this, the ranger actually raised the spear in his hand and stabbed it directly into the woman's abdomen. Immediately blood splattered out, and the woman was stunned. She lowered her head and looked at the clothes on her lower abdomen that were quickly stained red by blood. She then raised her head blankly and looked at Su Tong and others. Save, my child. Su Tong pushed the ranger away and stepped forward to take a look. His expression suddenly darkened. The child's face was bruised and he obviously died of suffocation, and it took a long time. At this time, the ranger's expression suddenly changed. He looked up and looked behind them. The information returned through the sound wave showed that something was approaching them at an extremely fast speed. The speed was definitely not comparable to those of the infected. There's something, and it's very fast. Let's go. Not knowing what it was, the ranger felt frightened and hurriedly urged Su Tong and the others to leave quickly. The 4 of them turned and ran down, but when Su Tong ran down the corner of the stairs, he suddenly felt a strange feeling in his heart. When he looked back, he saw a shadow standing next to the woman's body. With the help of dark vision, the outline of the shadow gradually became clear. It was a female corpse with half of its head eaten away. But strangely, the female corpse did not pounce on it like other infected people. Instead, he reached out to pick up the child in the woman's arms, caressing the dead baby with his palms, and looked at Su Tong sideways, with a dark green light shining in his eyes. Just when Su Tong was surprised, the woman actually grinned at him and walked upstairs with the baby in her arms. In a daze, he vaguely seemed to hear a baby crying. "Doctor, why are you in such a daze?" At this time, the ranger suddenly let out a loud voice, which made Su Tong startled. When he looked again, the cries of the woman and the baby had disappeared. He didn't have time to turn back to see what was going on, because the fireworks had stopped at this time, and the infected people were rushing back quickly. If he didn't run away, he would be blocked in this corridor. When Su Tong hurried downstairs, he could already see the infected people running towards them in the distance. Fortunately, these infected people did not move very fast, and the distance was long. By the time Su Tong closed the large iron door of the supermarket, these infected people were belatedly arriving. The sound of the iron door banging "pa pa pa" echoed in the night. After Su Tong and the others closed the second iron door heavily, the group finally collapsed on the ground. Near miss but no danger, near miss but no danger. The ranger sat down on the ground, picked up a bottle of mineral water, put it in his mouth and started drinking. Although there were no dangers along the way, his heart almost jumped out of his throat along the way. Who would have thought that there would be so many infected people in this inconspicuous tube building? If they were really surrounded, it would be a disaster. As long as it's okay, it'll be okay. Ant Wang carefully groped Xiao Chenzi's body and felt relieved after making sure that he was safe. As for the other boy, Ant Wang also knew him. He was the child of Xiao Chenzi's neighbor, named Zhang Jiang. The 2 children often played together. Now and brothers are the same. Being able to bring Zhang Jiang back, This result must be a surprise to Ant Wang. As for Zhang Qiang's impersonation of Xiao Chenzi, both Su Tong and Yuxia chose to remain silent. Everyone knew that there was no right or wrong in the face of life and death. Zhang Qiang's actions may seem immoral, but when life and death are at stake, who can say that he is wrong? Side mission, rescue completed. When you complete the side mission, you can randomly unlock a prop card. At this time, a prompt sounded in both ears at the same time. In Cantor's mood, the two of them seemed to be waiting for a trial, waiting for the prompt to unlock the props. Item card Demon Power has been unlocked. Hearing the news from the space, Su Tong couldn't help covering his forehead and smiled bitterly, but the ranger on the side showed joy on his face, ha ha ha. He slapped his thigh and said to Su Tong with an ecstatic expression on his face, "It's done, now I don't have to worry anymore." Just when he was about to show off to Su Tong the prop card he had unlocked. Suddenly, Su Tong raised his head with a strange expression, and saw a countdown appearing above them again.